All right, let's talk about something that affects every single one of us. Taxes. I know, it can feel like this big, complicated black box, but today we're going to pry it open and actually follow the money step by step through what's called the American tax hierarchy. Okay, let's get into it. You know the feeling, right? You look at your paycheck, you see that money's gone, and you just have to wonder, where does it actually end up? Is it fixing that annoying pothole down the street, or is it funding some huge project thousands of miles away? Well, here's the thing. Your tax money doesn't just get dumped into one giant government pot. The reality is it splits off and heads to three totally different destinations, and each one has a very specific job to do. And that journey follows a really clear three-level structure. Just think of it like a pyramid. At the very top, you've got the federal government. Then, one step down is your state. And finally, right there at the base is your local community. This is basically the roadmap for our whole explainer today. First up, let's tackle the big one, the federal level. This is the largest piece of the entire tax puzzle, and it's responsible for funding the operations of the whole country. Yeah, when you hear the word taxes, the IRS is probably the first thing that pops into your head, right? That's because they're the ones who collect taxes at this top level. Their scope is nationwide, which means the rules are pretty much the same whether you live in Florida or Alaska. And their main goal? To fund programs and services for all of America. So where does the federal government get all this cash? Well, the biggest chunk, as you probably know, comes from the federal income tax. But that's not all. There are also payroll taxes that are specifically earmarked for Social Security and Medicare. Plus, there are taxes on corporate profits and even special excise taxes on things like gasoline and tobacco. And what does all that money pay for? We're talking about the really big-ticket national scale stuff. Things like our entire national defense and military. It pays for Social Security and Medicare benefits, our huge interstate highway system, and the federal response when a major disaster like a hurricane strikes. Okay, so now we're dropping down one level in the hierarchy. We're zooming in from the whole country to your specific state. And this is where things get really interesting because honestly, where you live can change the rules of the game completely. So instead of the big national IRS, each state has its own tax department, kind of like a mini IRS, just for that state. Their power stops right at the state line, which means tax rates, the rules, what even gets taxed, it can all be wildly different from one state to the next. Now, the ways states collect their money might sound pretty familiar. A lot of them have a state income tax, which works a lot like the federal one. Most also have a sales tax on goods you buy. On top of that, states collect unemployment taxes from businesses, and some even have their own versions of corporate and property taxes. And here's a perfect example of just how different states can be. Most states file an income tax. But then you've got this handful of states, like Texas and Florida, that have no state income tax at all. Zero. That one detail completely changes the financial landscape for people living there and means the state has to get its money from other places, like maybe higher sales or property taxes. So where does all this state tax money actually go? It's all about funding services that operate just within that state's borders. We're talking about things like public schools and state universities, keeping up state highways, and paying for state police and prisons. It also covers huge public health programs like Medicaid. All right, let's bring this all the way down to your own backyard. We're at the third and final level, local taxes. This is where your money is funding the stuff you see and use every single day. Now, these taxes aren't collected by some far-off federal or state agency. We're talking about your city hall, your county government, maybe even your local school district. The scope here is hyper-local, and the one and only purpose is to fund the services that make your community run. The absolute king of local funding almost everywhere is the property tax. It's based on the value of homes and commercial buildings. On top of that, a lot of cities tack on their own local sales tax. And depending on where you are, you might even pay a specific tax just for your school district or a city-level income tax. And this, right here, is where you can literally see your tax dollars at work. This money pays for the absolute essentials of daily life. We're talking about your local police officers and firefighters, the neighborhood schools, the public libraries, and keeping up the local parks. It's also what makes sure the garbage gets picked up and you have clean water. This stuff truly defines life in your town. So we've looked at all three levels one by one. Now let's pull back and put them all side by side. It'll give us the full, clear picture of how this whole system fits together. Seriously, think of this as the ultimate cheat sheet. You've got the federal level at the top, which covers absolutely everyone in the country and funds massive things like the military. Then you have the state level, which only covers its own residents, funding things like state universities. And finally, the local level, which just covers your town and pays for things like your fire department.
Each one has its own distinct job to do.
If there's just one thing you remember from all of this, let it be this simple idea. Federal taxes run the country, state taxes run the state, and local taxes take care of your city or town.